Once again to our beautiful JNForever family Zoom meeting. I hope everybody's doing well. Sunday has come and gone, and yay, we don't have a curfew, but not much else, but we all remain hopeful and that things will sort of improve and get easier and easier each week. I also hope that you all had a very good and meaningful Yom Kippur and that you are motivated and strong for a quality year ahead. The in-house rules you all know by now. The host, we've muted everyone. You're very welcome to ask questions at the end, and you're also very welcome to type your questions into the chat box, and I will read them out to Joseph at the end. A very, very hearty welcome to our National President, Ronit Freud, who's in the house, and our amazing Executive Director, Ilana Maisels. Thank you guys for joining us. And everyone sort of knows by now, I'm Jackie Chait. I'm the Legacy Manager for JNF Victoria, and that leaving a bequest is an incredibly benevolent and meaningful thing to do for generations to come. I'm always available for a confidential chat, so feel free to contact me anytime. This week we have a very, very special guest joining us live from Israel. It is my honor and privilege to introduce Joseph Gitler to you. In 2003, Joseph Gitler founded Leket Israel, the National Foodbank, as a one-man volunteer operation to respond to the paradox of growing hunger and poverty in Israel on the one hand, and significant food waste on the other. And I actually remember, Joseph, last time you were here, you mentioned that you were using your wife's car for the transportation of all this food, and eventually she just wouldn't take it back. She said, keep it for obvious reasons. So anyway, that was amazing. Joseph's operation has grown to become the only food rescue and resource organization in Israel. Today, Leket distributes over 40 million pounds of produce and perishable goods to Israel's socio-economic periphery through its partnerships with 200 non-for-profit organizations, reaching more than 175,000 people in need each week. That is unbelievable. As founder and chairman, Joseph has succeeded in expanding the scope of his organization, and Leket is now thriving with over 100 employees, 12 delivery vehicles, and tens of thousands of volunteers, a direct result of his dedication and perseverance. Outside of his work with Leket, Joseph is a founding member of 10 Gov and Israel Gives, as well as an active board member of Respecs, the Mayo Medical Center, Camp Moshava Canada, Jewelers, Mekaz Panim, and Artists and Musicians for Israel. Joseph is also the Israeli representative for the Global Food Banking Network. His tireless work has been acknowledged, and he has received the coveted Presidential Award for Volunteerism from former President Shimon Peres, the Rupin Academic Center's 2017 Honorary Fellowship, the 2018 Kahan Award, was named Man of the Year by the Ranana Rotary in 2018. He was awarded Beit HaPalmach's 2016 Yigal Alon Prize, and he was the recipient of the inaugural B'nai Zion Prize. And he was named as one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world. Most recently, he was selected to receive the Compassion Award for Children and Youth at Risk. I'm exhausted just reading this list. I mean, that is phenomenal. And if that weren't enough, Joseph has received his Juris Doctor degree from Fordham University and also has a bachelor's degree from Yeshiva University. He resides in Renana with his wife and their 5 children. So over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Jackie. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. I'll mention, because this is what a proud father does. It's 5 children, but soon to be the first son-in-law. So everyone can wish a mazel tov for my 22-year-old daughter. That's a good way to start the new year. So thank you all. Thank you, Jackie, for that very lovely introduction. Thank you, Ilana, for so many things. First of all, making my trip to Australia happen. I can't believe it's been 2.5 years already. How the world has changed. I don't think we have to, I think we all know that. And thank you for organizing this and for always thinking about how you can help Leket, and I would say most important, for waking me up at 7:40 this morning. I was fast asleep. So you may not have noticed that, Alana, but I was fast asleep, and your reminder was very timely. Um, my voice, for those who've heard me, this is the voice. It's not just because I've only been up for 25 minutes now. And of course, a big thank you as well to Ronit Freyd, who took such wonderful care of me on my trip to Australia. And I've had the good fortune to see a few times in Israel. I would say now, even if you're able to come to Israel, unfortunately, it's not the right time right now. So, although I know from friends in Australia what kind of lockdown you've been under in your homes, and I'm happy to hear that now you're able to get out a little bit more. And I would say my advice is get out while you can. Okay, I'm not talking about even getting on a plane. Just get out of your houses while you can, because unfortunately in Israel it seems to just be going from worse to worse. So let me, Jackie, I wrote you a message just to tell me how long approximately you want me to speak for. So maybe just
anything 30 to 40 minutes, whatever you're comfortable with, and then I'm
Right.
sure there'll be a lot of questions.
Okay, hopefully it won't be that long, although I've been known to go on and on. So I'll try my best for the good of my voice as well. I'll try not to go on for that long, but maybe I'll just introduce you all to Leket. I know some of you have heard me last time I came. It's nice to see so many of you on video. That's as close to human contact as we're getting today, especially since last night at 1:30 in the morning, the government, and whatever anyone feels about the government, I can say one thing: they're working hard. They're putting in hours. It's kind of like my first job when I worked at a law firm. They told me about, you got to be, even if you have nothing to do, make sure to be in the office late because you got to impress people. So that's what some people feel about the government. But one thing, unfortunately or fortunately, they approved last night is you're not allowed to have anyone visit your sukkah over Sukkot who's not part of your family. I think the problem is the fines aren't big enough. The fines are only 500 shekels. So there are a lot of people who are willing to take that chance, I think, for 500 shekels. So anyway, we'll get to where Israel is soon. Let me introduce you. I don't need to talk about myself. Jackie did a bang-up job. I guess that's my new bio. That's the first time I ever heard it. It's a little bit exhausting, a little bit exaggerated, but if it impressed anyone on the Zoom, I'll take it. So, and by the way, I know this is my American accent. I am Israeli, but I've only been here for 20 years. My first 25 years were spent in the US. So it's not how much television I watched growing up as an Israeli. It's not me trying to impress you with my New York accent, which probably wouldn't be that impressive anyway. And so if I'm speaking too quickly, just send me a message and I'll slow down, no problem whatsoever. So as Jackie mentioned, I'm fortunate to live in Ra'anana with many of Jackie's cousins. She doesn't sound like a native either, if I got it correctly, but they call Ra'anana Ra'ananasburg. So that's because so many of her countrymates, I'll say the ones who didn't make it into Australia, ended up here. So we're happy to have them. And so I've been in Israel 20 years. I came from New York. My wife Leela is from Toronto. We met in summer camp in Israel when we were 15 years old. We've been together ever since. Certainly, I don't have to tell most of you, if we can survive the endless lockdowns of COVID together, we're good. We're good for, we're good until 120 if we can survive this. Same goes for my kids. My youngest is 10. Today's actually his 10th birthday. And I've been doing his schooling, most of it. So even though my wife is a teacher or was a teacher, and now she's a tour guide. So if we can survive, this period where a lot of what we're doing is Zooms, which he's not really interested in, and a lot of homeschooling, then I think the family is going to end up even stronger than it was before. So I am blessed with 5 kids. I'll just give you a quick rundown on them because I think that's the most important thing to know about anyone's family. So my oldest daughter, Maytal, is 22, and she just finished 3 years in the Israeli army in an intelligence unit, an elite intelligence unit. Find me someone who says their kid wasn't in an elite unit. I'm looking for someone like that. And she's the one who just got engaged to a very nice boy from El Azhar. He's a year older than her. And the good news for us is neither of them have even started college yet. So we're going to see a lot of them over the next few years. And certainly, I don't have to tell you, many of you on this call have children who you've supported way longer than you ever expected. So we're about to go down that road as well. That's number one. Number two is 18-year-old boy, just finished high school, and he's learning in yeshiva this year, which is, as you can imagine, not what was typical over the years. Number three is Ayelet, a 16-year-old girl. She's wonderful. We love her. She's working hard now in school. She's motivated. My 13-year-old daughter is great also. She loves dancing. She loves makeup. She loves making acai bowls. So she knows, she heard already in Melbourne, you have some of the best places in the world for stuff like that. So she's getting ready to make a trip, and totally not motivated in school right now. The Zooms are not working for her. And the last child, Ziv, whose birthday today, 10th birthday. If I posted a picture of him on the group from what he looked like at his birthday party last night, he's very tall and he loves to eat. So he was very happy to have a 10th birthday party at midnight, Israel time last night, with his grandmothers and one of his grandfathers who were on the call. That's my family. They bring lots of joy. Zoom has not made things easier, but we're doing a lot of different things than we used to. And I hope you've also been, able to, as much as possible, take advantage of the crisis we're going through to find ways, to connect with your family and friends differently. And frankly, you know what? These kind of calls and seeing, 59 people on this call is incredible for me and, game changing for Leket. So what is Leket? So Leket started 17 years ago. I don't want to say it wasn't a whim, but I was working, our family actually owns a tech company in Israel, and I was between projects. We might own it, but I was the lowest man on the totem pole, which I've learned over the years, that's the best place to put a son-in-law, okay? So I was the lowest guy in the totem pole. As well I should have been. I had no technical skills. I have no technical skills today. I'm pleased that I could, push the invite link for this call and that it worked. And I spent my first 3 years of Aliyah working for this tech company, which thankfully is a very successful company. And I was fortunate that, my wife's cousin gave me a job there when we made Aliyah. And what happened is, as you remember, because we just had the 20th anniversary of the Intifada. So you had the Intifada, you had the change in Israel's economy for good for most people, which was the success of our high-tech economy. And all that came together in 2003 when the Intifada was really hitting hard and there was no tourism to Israel, kind of like today. In those days, it was the choice of people not to come. Today, we're really not letting anyone in unless you're Israeli or unless you have a very special reason to come into the country. And those things came together in 2003 to create a terrible, terrible economic situation for so many Israelis, where the cost of living in Israel had grown over the years. That's already in the year 2000. And it's even worse today in the year 2020. The cost of living had grown. A lot of people, especially at the height of the Intifada, were unemployed, especially in the hospitality world, the service industry, which again, we'll get to it a little bit more, but we're seeing now, I would say on steroids, okay, whatever we saw in 2003 is much, much worse right now. And all that came together for me personally to a situation where I was a little bit in between things at work, and I started to read news reports, see people knocking on my door, and I said at the time, these are not the usual people who were knocking on my door the first few years of my aliyah. These are, I don't know I guess I assume um, people make it to Australia also to knock on doors and ask for charity all the way from Israel. I know certainly they make it to Teaneck, New Jersey, where I grew up, or Toronto, where my wife grew up. Um, when I came to Australia, I didn't stay in anyone's home. I was put up at your esteemed kosher hotel I was told, the finest renovated room they have. So it was great. I'm not complaining. When someone puts me up for free, I don't complain. And it was actually great. I was well taken care of. And so all these things came together, and people were knocking on my door who were not the usual suspects. And I started to get this pit in my stomach, which said to me, we have no tourists. We have, again, normal people, quote unquote, people who had quality jobs, people who had savings, people who were paying mortgages, knocking on my door because they worked in the hotel industry, and people aren't coming to the hotels, so they've been put on furlough. We had, people who had good, solid, but unfortunate jobs that just didn't pay them enough to survive. And I'm in between things, and I'm going to all these beautiful weddings, and I'm going to all these bar and bat mitzvahs, and I'm fortunate enough to go to these hotels. And all I see, like all of you, and I presume most of you, if not all of you, have been to Israel, and probably multiple times. One thing that no one says when they come to Israel is that there doesn't seem to be enough food, okay? You go to hotels, you go to smachot, you come as a business visitor and they take you out for lunch, you go to a corporate cafeteria, and even if if you have any children or grandchildren or family members or friends who've served in the Israeli army, so even the Israeli army, where maybe the food isn't as high quality, one thing the soldiers will tell you is there's always enough. They may not like it. They may pine for their coming home to eat at home, but there's certainly enough food to go around. So, when we talk about poverty in Israel or poverty in Australia, we're not talking about a lack of resources. We're not talking about a lack of food. There's more enough food to go around in the US, Canada, the UK, to feed everyone and to feed everyone well. And so the issue was one of individual incomes, individual resources, the ability to take care of your families properly. So at this time, I said to myself, well, all these people are asking for help. I'm hearing so many reports of people who need help. The government's talking about it. The news is talking about it. And yet, there seems to be a piece that's missing, okay? Israel is filled with charities who take care of the poor, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, Meals on Wheels programs, battered women's shelters, after-school clubs for kids, programs for the elderly, programs for Holocaust survivors, all of them doing God's work, and frankly, doing it beautifully. But what I noticed was, after I started to talk to people, that what was missing was one centralized body, like you have, Foodbanks Australia, like you have Oz Harvest, like you have, I can't remember all the names of the places I visited when I was in Australia, but all these wonderful organizations who their job is simply to get food. Their job is not to rehabilitate. Their job is not to educate. Their job is not to help the poor, the poverty-stricken, youth at risk. Their job isn't to get them out of their situation, which of course is the highest calling, but their job is to get those organizations food, which they can use to take care of the people coming to these organizations. And that's a very typical type of organization. The United States is filled with them. Australia is filled with them, as is Canada. And so I was really, really surprised 17 years ago when I started to ask around, and what was missing in the state of Israel was a food bank. Okay? There was no organization completely focused on figuring out how to get food in bulk, cheaply, efficiently, and then to distribute that to agencies feeding the poor. Because agencies feeding the poor, what they were doing until Leket existed was primarily raising money to buy food, which all of them still do. But because of our existence today, either they've grown or they need to raise less money to buy food. Okay? So that was really our jumping off point. The fact that there was no central body, and we call ourselves Leket Israel, the National Food Bank, but understand, we gave ourselves that title. We're not a government entity, we're not a government agency. We get support from the government, but we are a traditional not-for-profit organization, which relies on help from many, many different sectors of Israeli society. So that was my jumping off point. And as Jackie said, I started to call up caterers to ask them if they had excess food. I knew the answer was yes. All of them said at the time, come, we'll give you the food free of charge. We're not worried about liability. We're not worried about anything. We're in the state of Israel. How can we help? We know there's so many people in need. And that's how I got started, as Jackie said, in my wife's Aliyah Subaru station wagon, which, yes, if you all remember that Seinfeld episode where Jerry can't get the smell out of his car, that was the original Leket mobile. We picked up food. The truth is, the first two Leket mobiles were my Subaru station wagon, and my brother-in-law, if you remember those old, very long Volvos, so my brother-in-law had one of those. Unfortunately for him, he went on sabbatical to Belgium for a couple of years, and he lent us that car, and that became Leket Mobile number 2. So of course, when he got back to Israel, he also said, I'm going to move on and buy another car. So the first 2 cars for Leket were, I guess, donated by the family, and those cars were really used just in the beginning. And so the beginning of Leket, and I'm going to get through the history now, and I'm going to move on. The beginning of Leket really was excess food from event halls, picked up primarily by yours truly. And then within a few weeks of us getting started, signing up local volunteers in Ra'anana, getting the word known that we needed people to go out at night in their own vehicles, picking up excess food that was being given with the greatest joy by the owners of these catering companies. It was a fascinating thing to see. People, America is very different because America is very litigious and people are very worried about liability. But in Israel, people were just thrilled that after all these years of people commenting, what are they doing with all the extra food at this wedding, at this bar bat mitzvah? What are they doing with all the extra food at this hotel breakfast, which, we'll get to, but everyone on this call knows what I'm talking about. They were so thrilled that someone had basically said, okay, let's see if we can do something with this. So when our volunteers would come to the catering halls at 11, 12, 1, 2 in the morning to pick up the excess food, they were greeted with joy, with applause from especially the waiters, who, so many of them, their job was typically to throw that food away. And of course, in hindsight, what should have happened is that caterers should have just done this themselves. But my late grandfather was actually a caterer, a big New York caterer, and no one works harder than people who own catering halls. They're like restaurant owners. The work is endless. The customers are always complaining. The hours are crazy. And so they were just waiting for an organization that would say to them, we will be there. If there is a decent amount of excess food at the end of this event, we will be there to make sure that that food goes to feed the poor. So that's really how Leket started. I just want to give you a few big picture items, and then we'll go into some numbers and projects and talk about where we are today. So just structurally, it's very important to mention this. Leket is a umbrella organization, which means that we don't feed the poor directly. Usually, COVID has made everything different, but traditionally, we gather food from where we can get it. We get it free of charge. We don't pay for the food. Our expenses are trucking and employees and gas and insurance and warehousing. And all that food is distributed by a network of our own trucks and by volunteers and by corporate partners and municipal partners. And we have about 1,000 volunteers normally. I'm talking pre-COVID now, about 1,000 volunteers every week who help us in all our activities. All the food, and this is the most important thing, is distributed free of charge to the agencies we serve, meaning the agencies who are doing the hardest work, dealing with the sick and the survivors and the newly poor, which is a lot of what we're dealing with now. We want them to focus on doing their job, okay? And their job is to help people succeed, survive, move on with their lives. And so we don't charge them anything. And we deliver any organization that wants the food delivered directly to them. We deliver it directly to them. We're trying to really give the perfect customer service. And we always say that our most important stakeholders are the agencies and, of course, the people that they serve. So that's structurally. Leket works from a lot in the south all the way up to Metula in the north. We pride ourselves, many points in between as well. And we work, of course, as a national food bank. We work with everyone in Israel, Jew and non-Jew alike, Christians, Muslim, Druze, Circassian, Bedouin, and the tens of thousands of African refugees, most of whom live in South Tel Aviv. And so we're very proud of that fact. And of course, we pray for the day where I don't even have to mention that, where that would be obvious to everyone on the call, that anyone who calls themselves a national organization in Israel works with all sectors of Israeli society. That structure. Our two main projects are what I mentioned, and that is rescuing excess food from event halls, corporate cafeterias, army bases, and the hotel industry. Those are 4 main sources of cooked food. Pre-March 15th, that was running at somewhere about 10,000 meals every single day. And then distribution mostly on the same day, some of that food getting stored overnight and then distributed to agencies the next day. And again, that food is meant to help. I'll give you an example. We work with a lot of after-school club for kids. And many of them, before Leket existed, they were giving the kids, junky food or whatever they could afford, which often was not very much. And the hook of telling the kids, we can now give you a high quality, hot meal that's coming. Just think about it. The food from the Tel Aviv Hilton, okay, now going to an after-school club for kids, you're going to get those kids to come, especially kids who are not as fortunate as all of us, on the call. So they're getting the highest quality meal that exists. And so that's a hook to keep them in and to keep them in during the day and hopefully then succeed in their studies. And this is really what, if you think deeply about what Leket is, we're an organization that's just trying to get people succeed. Our currency is food. Your currency could be money, or you might own you could own a construction company that's going to come in and fix up, the kids, the after school club for kids, or you might give them computers, whatever it is. And there's many different pieces of the puzzle, but at the end of the day, our goal is the same, and that's helping the battered woman, helping the family survive, helping the youth at risk succeed. And I always use my own daughter as an example. And when she graduated from high school, I remember her saying to us, she understood how lucky she was that we said to her, she had trouble with the math, you might call them the maths in Australia. I know that's what they call it in the UK, so maybe it's the same down by you. I know you've been independent for a long time, okay? And she said, if you hadn't given me an unlimited tutoring budget, I never ever would have survived. I never would have gotten into the Army units that I got into. And for us as parents, it was wonderful because we saw that she understood that she's on easy street. She's a hard worker, which actually, that's the best thing. Someone who it's hard for them and they have to work hard. But she understood that she had all the benefits that one could have in this world. And, one of my goals at Leket is hearing your son didn't make it, you, Joseph, your son didn't make it into pilot's course because this kid from Kiryat Bialik, who spent every afternoon of his life in an after-school club for kids, he got it, okay? And part of the reason he got it was because of the food that Leket provided, which kept him coming day after day. So that's really, in many ways, the end goal of what we're doing is, of course, feeding people, but feeding them with a greater purpose. So that's on the cooked food side. And we were running in the millions of meals for this year. And, the best sources of that food was the hotel industry, especially in Eilat, where there's so much excess food from these big hotels they've built over the years. And the Army, and again, the Army, maybe not the greatest food, but it's still food. It's good food, especially for kids. The schnitzels, the rice, that kind of food, and corporate cafeterias. Those were our three main sources of food. I'll get to COVID in a second. The other program, our other main program, our biggest program, is really what we call Leket. Leket, Shikha, Upeah, three biblical concepts. If you remember your Bible, the book of Ruth, leaving a corner of the field, not picking up what falls off the wagon, the kind of philanthropy that was created in the Bible for farmers they were the business people of ancient times. And so we've modernized that because we know, just like in Australia, a little bit is easier in Israel because of the size of the country, but farmers always have huge amounts of excess because of market price, because of acts of God where the crops are damaged, because of what we call ugly fruits and vegetables, which basically are perfectly good, healthy, safe, nutritious fruits and vegetables, which look funny. And we've all been socialized that every fruit and vegetable looks perfect because that's all they show us in the supermarkets. And so a lot of that stuff doesn't make it to market. You can have order cancellations. In Israel, unfortunately, we have war situations where borders get closed. And so Leket, for not all 17 years, but for the last 15 years, has had huge opportunities to pick these crops when they're left in the field, to pick them up when they've already been picked and they're in the packing house and they've been disqualified, or there's just so much of it that there's nowhere to sell it anymore. And so Leket has this huge project, which you're all welcome. Please God, soon you can come to Israel to come participate in, picking in the field, packing them up in our warehouse, and distributing them to the same organizations that we work with in cooked food, and many more than that. It's a massive, massive project. We will probably this year get closer to 50 million pounds, so over 20,000 tons this year of fruits and vegetables, again, free of charge from the farmers. Understandably, massive logistics costs making it happen, picking it up, moving it, picking it. We have our own team of paid pickers in addition to volunteers. And of course, COVID has thrown this project for a loop. So let me talk about COVID for a couple of minutes, and then let's just take some questions. Unemployment in Israel in March was about 4%. Unemployment in Israel at the highest was 40%. Now we're down somewhere, depends who you ask, 10, 11, 12% before the newest lockdown. And since the newest lockdown started, over 200,000 Israelis have filed for unemployment. Israel is providing unemployment insurance. It's actually being relatively generous, but relatively generous when you earn 6,000 shekels a month, and now you're getting 4,000 shekels a month, means that you probably are not able to pay your bills and feed your family with dignity. So not surprisingly, since the middle of March, when this really hit Israel, when Israel entered its first lockdown, demand for our services have gone through the roof. Okay, 50% more, 100% more, and it may grow because now we're in this very serious lockdown, which our prime minister last night said may continue in some form for a year. Okay, so now he may be scaremongering to try to get people to listen and stay in their homes, but either way, depending where you work, depending on your health, if you're elderly, who of course, elderly, we're hoping mostly stay in their homes for their own safety. But if you work in the hospitality industry, where every single hotel in Israel, except for Corona hotels, are currently closed. If you work in restaurants, which have been open, closed, open for seating, open only for delivery, open for pickup and delivery. If you work in that industry, if you're an owner, if you're a worker, you're getting killed right now. Stores, every non-vital store in Israel is currently closed, meaning what's open? Supermarkets, pharmacies, pet stores, gotta have your pet stores open, eyeglass stores, not much more than that. Home stores, like a home center, Home Depot kind of stores. Outside of that, every other store is closed. They can make deliveries, but you and I know when incomes are down, when people are unemployed or have had their salaries cut back, underemployed, you're talking about an impossible situation, economic situation, despite government help for many hundreds of thousands of Israelis. And I can promise you, for the hundreds of thousands of people that Leket served before COVID, their situation under COVID has not gotten any better, because these were already the people who were struggling to survive. So, the people who Leket serves, who maybe work in supermarkets, who are doing very, very well now. So maybe they're doing better. Maybe there's been some wage pressure there and they're surviving better. But most of the people that we serve are really struggling. And unfortunately, there's many, many, many new poor. And what's most disconcerting right now and most painful to see are the new poor who never imagined. We'll share with you after. I'll send Jackie and Alana, a couple of videos and things to see about Leket. But we just put out a video of a woman who's getting food from Leket, who's an opera singer. She's a full-time opera singer in one of the operas. I'm a total bore, so don't ask me which opera in Israel. I didn't even survive long enough. My wife and I went to the magnificent operas that they do at Masada now. And we said, we're going to try to be cultured. And we went down there, and we bought tickets, and we only lasted for the first act because I said to my wife, that one song was 35 minutes. What do they want from me? I'm out of here. So we went back to our hotel earlier. So you got a bore. You're on a call with an American bore, which you would have assumed about me anyway. So that's all right. And so, this video talks about the fact that she's had a good job all her years since she moved to Israel, decent salary, surviving, but probably living beyond her means. And she's been out of work for 6 months because what operas are, it's kaput. So there's the arts, and so many people are suffering. So demand has skyrocketed. And what happened to Leket? So 2 things happened to Leket. Our source of cooked meals since March has basically disappeared. Okay, we've had our ups and downs. We still get some food from the army. We were getting food from hotels, but basically corporate cafeterias are closed. Everyone's working from home. Okay, hotels were open. We were getting some nice meals from hotels in June, July, August, but now they're completely shut down. So meals are back to zero. Okay, and so that's been very, very painful. And so what we've been doing, and this is really the key thing, since March, Leket has been doing something which we never do, and that is purchasing meals. We don't purchase meals because why purchase when you can get it for free? We've been purchasing meals, though, very strategically. We've been purchasing them from caterers, hotels, and even restaurants who normally give us the food for free. And in order to help some of them, we can't do with all of them, but some of them stay afloat, we've been buying food from them in bulk at very reasonable prices. Still costs us 5 times more than what it normally costs us to distribute, because we normally get the food for free. It costs us about $1 to pick it up and distribute it around the country. Now it's costing us about $5, which again is not an expensive price for a meal. But if that's not your normal business, that means a massive new expense. And we've kept hundreds and hundreds of Israelis around the country who would have been furloughed from event halls, caterers, restaurants, hotels, who've been able to keep their jobs working in kitchens and feed the poor at the same time. So we're not an employment agency, but it's been fantastic getting this food and then bringing it to the agencies we work with, who we normally give our rescued food to free of charge, and now bringing them these meals. We've done about 1 million purchased meals since March. So thankfully, our supporters have been behind us, but certainly I'm happy to be on a call with so many new people, because certainly donor fatigue is setting in for the people that we know. And so we're very honored to have this opportunity to talk to all of you. One of the beautiful, beautiful things I've seen, I just want to give you an example from the restaurants, has been how many restaurants we've spoken to who've said to us, you know what, I'm having a hard time, but Chaim Yankel down the street, he's in a much worse situation than me. If you're purchasing meals to give to the poor, give it to him. And to me, nothing says better than, despite what you read in the newspapers and despite what you see online, that there still is some solidarity in this country, and we're all fighting this together, and hopefully we can keep that. So that's on the cooked food. Very painful for us to not be rescuing meals like we normally do, but we're very thankful that we've been able to purchase meals to fill some of the needs, not all of the needs, especially with all the new people who need help. And so we want to continue doing that as much as we can, and hopefully those of you who are on the call will be able to help us. The flip side actually has been agriculture, where it's been a bonanza. Unfortunately, a lot of pain for farmers who haven't been able to sell all their wares, because as much as I've increased purchase of fruits and vegetables in my home, that doesn't come close to making up for the hotel closures, the corporate closures, the lack of tourists who eat way, way, way more than whatever any of us are doing in our own homes. So we've had huge, huge opportunities in agriculture, and we are now on pace this year to anywhere between 30 to 50% more than what we provided last year. So massive, massive amounts. Sometimes up to 2,500 tons of fruits and vegetables that we've been collecting. So we've done, in order to make that a reality, we've reallocated resources. We've projects that we're not doing, we've taken resources from those projects. Trucks which aren't picking up excess food are now going and picking up food for all this excess crops, and huge variety of crops, huge amounts of crops. And so Leket as an organization, just to give you some finances, just on that, we're spending about $200,000 more a month than we were before COVID, okay? But it's been worth it because we're bringing in on average about 500 to 1,000 more tons every single month, and then distributing it to the agencies. And I know these are just numbers, but we'll send you all a couple of videos where you'll see what does 500 tons of carrots look like. Okay, it's hard to, and I know Australia is big in the commodities world and big in growing and exporting, but I'm not sure everyone really knows, even with that, what 500 tons of carrots looks like. So we'll send you. So thankfully, we've been able to keep on feeding the agencies we serve massive amounts of crops. And by the way, even sometimes we have so much of one type of crop. So the newest thing we've done, and I'm going to finish with this and then take questions, is we've actually been working with some companies, also struggling companies, trying to give them a little bit of income to make different types of salads, either in bulk or in small individual family-sized portions, and then have that as part of what we're delivering as part of our arsenal and bringing it to them. I've said more than enough. I'm so thankful for your time. I'd love to take some questions from all of you. I see a few of them already in the chat, so maybe I'll just jump right in there.
Yeah, they have a look at the chats. There's two questions that are similar in terms of, finances. And one, Max Jotkovitz asked about kashrut supervision. And then there were two questions on the chat group about, do you get government help or where does the money come from? So similar.
Okay, so kashrut. So Leket, we are a secular Israeli organization, but almost all the food that we get is kosher because most bulk food in Israel is kosher from the hotels and from the corporate cafeterias and the army. When we do get a call for food from a restaurant, which let's say isn't kosher, it's still food. So we will have that picked up by one of our agency partners who's not kosher, because one of our biggest fears is picking up non-kosher food and then accidentally delivering it to Bnei Brak. And then, you can imagine how shrimps in Bnei Brak goes over. So we are terrified of a situation like that. So we keep it totally separate. And, but it's still food. And if we can get, and we're not a halachic organization, but we won't give any non-kosher food to Jewish agencies, even if the Jews there could care less, just because we don't need any trouble. And as we know in Israel, the rabbis can make trouble for you. So I can say I'm a secular organization, but they'll see the kippah on my head and they'll say, you don't look so secular to me. So we just try to stay away from creating situations that can make trouble for us. The flip side to that, though, is until I moved to Israel, I thought all fruits and vegetables were kosher. And of course they are, but there's all types of halachot in Israel that need to be followed. Tithing and orla, which is you can't eat from fruit trees until they're after 3 years old. So there's a lot of things that we, growing up in the diaspora, pay very little attention to that you have to here. So we're kosher friendly, let's call it that, okay? Government help. So more and more as the years have gone on, Leket's getting more and more government help. It's still not enough, but I will tell you that I think COVID is going to change that dramatically. The government of Israel now, the ministers, the president, which is another thing that we'll send you to, a column about the president's visit. We're not here yet. I like to say it like this because it makes me feel good. I like to say that the government's starting to look at us like a utility. Like we're just part of the fabric already. They have seen what a banged up job we've done during COVID, how we were able to get dozens of municipalities to work with us and distribute food for us, how much strength we have, strength from our supporters, the volunteers that we're able to recruit. And so while government support has been in the low few percents up till now, from the kind of conversations we're having, we expect that to grow dramatically in the future. I hope I'm right. Unfortunately, because Israel's been printing money like Australia, like the US, it may be that the government can make us promises, but there are going to be such cutbacks in the future that who knows what's going to be. Israel's about to go through a very painful recession. There's no, there's no other way about it unless we hit oil. And even hitting oil today isn't what it used to be with the price of oil. It might be better not to hit oil right now. So, so that's the government. The government helps. We have a lot of fans in the government, not enough money up till this point, but we really expect that to grow. Okay, where does the money come from? So, maybe this year, well, I don't know, will be this year, a couple of percent from the governments, and the rest is philanthropy, okay? And it really runs the gamut. One thing I will tell you, because I know it will be a follow-up question, is we get a fair bit of money in Israel traditionally. I'll say 25 to 30% of our budget. COVID has changed that dramatically. Israelis understand this is a worldwide crisis. There's pain in Australia. There's pain in the US. We're used to crisis in Israel. Give us money. So what did we do? We made sure that we're number one in Israel, that we're the hardest hit by the crisis. Okay, so that we can say to you, not only, and I'm smiling and I'm laughing and it's not funny at all, and it's very painful for so many people, but Israelis have been giving tremendously. We've, our development director, who some of you know, Paul Leiba, I think that's how you pronounce it, Leiba, who grew up in Melbourne. Some of you might know his brother. He's on this call with us. He's been with me since almost day one. We just had the numbers from our Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur campaign, and more than 50% of the donations came from Israelis. So Israelis understand now we need to take care of our own. So the money comes, normally number one in our giving is the U.S., Israel, and then it's a competition between Canada. Usually Canada's number three, and then it could be any country. But I'll be thrilled on our next call to say that moving into the fourth slot with a big bang is Australia. So, if that's a pep talk, there you go. That's my pep talk for support for Leket on this call. So that's where the money comes from. It's a lot of hard work. Used to be a lot of travel. That's gone, which frankly, I don't mind. If I come back, next time I come back to Australia, I want it to be for vacation. I didn't see a lot of the country. Let me tell you, when the JNF invites you, they work you to the bone, okay? They work, you want our support, you're going to work for it, okay? But I enjoyed it, and it was wonderful, and the people were wonderful. So, we worked very hard to raise the money, and actually, as I explained previously, we raised our budget tremendously during COVID. Okay, we made a decision in March. We could have made the decision. Our sources of food have dried up. We're shutting down that project, putting all those employees on furlough. We're going to continue picking up fruits and vegetables, and that's it. We made a decision, the right decision, which was we have all these people asking us for help. We have 17 years of goodwill. Let's see what 17 years of goodwill is worth when you go to your donor base, when you go to Israeli corporations, many of whom had said no to us, or their donations were very, very small, and say to them, there's huge demand, huge needs, Leket's in a pickle, and let's see how they respond. And so we're actually not eligible for some of the special government support for not-for-profits because we can't prove that we've been hit. We've been hit because we pushed hard to try to grow the organization. And I'm so thrilled of our team that made this decision. And our truck drivers, they're frontline workers. They're not they're not nurses or doctors, but they're pretty close. And when you see videos and pictures of them, they were in the beginning, now they just wear masks. But in the beginning, they were wearing the same hazmat suits that the doctors and nurses are wearing in the hospital in the heat of Israel, and going door to door in many cases, especially to the elderly who weren't coming out or didn't come out, and making sure that they got the food that they needed. Any other questions for me? Maybe Paul,
I think time for one more question, because
maybe Paul, maybe you can unmute Paul. I know he wants to say hello, and let him answer the last question because I've spoken without pause for too long.
Okay, there's Paul.
G'day.
Hi.
Hi.
Finally, someone you can understand.
Hi, Lana.
Hi.
Was there any more questions? And then anybody else? I'm just checking to see. Any further
If
questions?
not, Paul, why don't you finish off and say hello and finish off?
Okay, well, thank you for being with us for the last hour. I think you understand that, but listen, basically the problem, if you compared Israel to Australia, the problem is that Israelis have less respect or have more problem obeying rules, and as a result of that, you know, we're getting people into the second lockdown now is going to be far more difficult. There's a growing tension between the economic side and the health side, and for a while the economic side won, and the economy opened up very quickly, and I think as a result of that we're seeing now the effects of that with the thousands and thousands of people a day getting sick. I actually have a look at the age every morning. I sort of laugh, you know, you've got 15 people a day declared sick, and here we've got 7,000 a day. I mean, it's like it's frightening. It's and at the moment there's no great confidence that the government's getting it in hand and things will be okay. Eventually we believe it will be, but we're not in a good place. Israel's not in a good place at the moment, and so, you know, again, thank you for being with us. If you choose to support us, please do it through the JNF. We'd be delighted to receive your support. We actually were the beneficiaries of the Blue Box campaign, I think, Pesach 2 years ago. So thank you, Ilana, for that, and thank you again for all JNF people. Now, I'd like to, you know, in the old days, my father, some of you of the older ones may know, you know, my family, the Liebers. My father was Harry Lieber, Sire Suits. Many of you maybe had your sons or you had your bar mitzvah suit made with us. Unfortunately, Sires no longer exists. I mean, the imports killed us. But anyway, so, you know, I do have a connection to Australia, and I went to Mount Scopes and all that sort of business, and been here for a while now. But again, thank you for everything. And if you choose to support someone in Israel, please choose us.
Amazing, thank you. Before I call upon Bella to close the proceedings, I would just like to ask Ronit and Ilana. They just wanted to do, you know, a thank you and just, you know, a small blurb more about Leket. So over to you, lovely ladies.
Okay. Thanks, Jackie.
You can start.
And I just wanted to say that 3 years ago, I think it was, when we were in Israel, Ilana and I and the team looking for projects in 2017, one of the places we went was Leket. And the Leket program was tremendously impressive to us. And we decided there and then that we wanted to support Leket. And in 2018, for our for Green Sunday campaign, we decided we'd take Leket, and it was enormously successful because it resonated, I think, and it resonates very strongly with people who are philanthropically minded. And we were, you know, we had a wonderful time with Joseph, and it was a success. Now this year we had chosen a different project for our Rosh Hashanah Blue Box campaign here, well, in all of Australia, nationally. But what happened was that, you know, COVID, and what we could see was that there was a very strong need that had arisen, and Leket was struggling and suffering, and so we decided, because our project for this year was the Nitzana Park, which is a beautiful project, and we love that project, and we will return to it. But we decided that this was an immediate need, and we like to be nimble at JNF and address the important needs when they occur and as they occur. So we decided that we would change our Rosh Hashanah campaign to the Leket campaign. And I really hope that, that people will have the wherewithal to support in whatever way you can. To put food on people's tables, I think, is one of the most important things in the world that you could do. And this organization is magnificent. And I hope you'll be able to support them. So thank you.
I just want to say, everyone said the same, but Paul, I'm really happy to see you also today. And Joe, it's been wonderful working with you and your people on the ground. You're doing an amazing job. And I'm also lucky here that actually our leadership in Victoria made a decision to actually help you this time, and they could see the need and it's really a difficult time in Israel, as you explained, and for a lot of families and people who are at need at the moment. And I think it was really amazing of our leadership to come to the rescue of, and help. And I do believe that we will be successful. And thank you again for the partnership. And thank you, Jackie, for having us.
Thank you so much. I would like to just call upon Bella, who is the chair of JNForever, to thank Joseph from all of us. Bella, where is the lovely Bella? Bella.
Here we go. Here we go.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. First of all, Joseph, thank you so much for bringing us into your very special world. It makes us all sit back and think. We look at the WhatsApp and funnies about how much we're eating over this COVID, and we take a lot for granted, I think, but the work that you've done is just extraordinary. The COVID crisis is also, I think, a food crisis. For many people in Israel, the same as Victoria, we find ourselves in lockdown, isolated, without jobs, without money for many people to buy food, and the bank is at an all-time high in need. So I also urge all of us to get behind the JNF campaign to support your food bank, because the food bank brings more than food to people. It brings hope and social cohesion. So thank you very much for sharing your story with us. We certainly appreciate it, and I hope we'll all get behind you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bella. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. We won't have an event next week because it's during Sukkot, but we will be back again the week after, and we have the inimitable Professor Lisa Palver-Jackson, who will finally be joining us. We promised that it would be rescheduled, and she will absolutely be there. So please diarize this. The events will go out, of course. And until we meet again, please take care, enjoy the sun, enjoy your time, as Joseph said, that you're allowed outside. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much. And thank you once again, Joseph, for an early wake up this morning and for joining us and giving us such an amazing insight. And goodbye to everybody.